Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Discovery Channel. This is Tom O'Connor from, I hope the ground doesn't start shaking, New Orleans. If we start to do this, they're using, you guys may have heard of this. They're using a technology that they're putting water pipes in down our street. And they don't dig up trenches. They dig a hole like a couple of blocks down, assemble the pipes, and then push them through. Yeah. Yeah. And the first time I saw 750 feet of pipe down the street, I said to myself, that's never going to happen. That's not going to work. They can't do that. Well, they did do that, and they're on the second segment right now. But every now and then we do get a little trembler. So I'll apologize ahead of time if that happens. Rachi, still in Tel Aviv?
Yep, I'm on my long stay until August. I'm over here. Today was actually a very exciting day here. I haven't heard the results, but the Israeli Bar Association had their elections today, which of course, like everything here, is political, and we don't talk politics on this chat. But yeah, it's big here because,
but it's Israeli politics. So who are we going to offend, right?
Right, exactly. But it's been interesting because whoever is basically in charge of the Bar Association is on the committee that elects Supreme Court justices, which right now is the biggest political topic in the country, is judicial reform. So all of a sudden, this election that no one ever cared about ever, except for the, however many thousands of lawyers we've got in this country, which per capita, we have more lawyers than anywhere else. Surprise. But all of a sudden, the Israeli Bar Association election is like the biggest news in the country. It's weird.
Wow.
So
is it a mandatory bar? Do you have to join to practice? Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's been interesting. Anyway,
cool.
Let's go on with our guest.
All right. Well, we're really happy to have with us Jeff Brandt. Jeff is his day job is the CIO at Jackson Kelly in Charleston, West Virginia. But I know him best, as many of you viewers may, as the editor, chief cook, and bottle washer of
sure. That was your Boston accent. Your Boston accent.
Exactly. A bottle wash. The Law Technology Daily Digest from PinHawk LLC, the PinHawk plethora of products that come in with daily feeds on what's going on. And it's my go-to daily site for information and good commentary. It's got some great commentary. So, Jeff, I thank you heartily for that.
We will dig in on that for sure.
I want to get into that, because there are two people in this business who I just don't know how they do it. I think you're both vampires or something. Yep. One of them is you doing the PinHawk every day, and the other one is Doug Austin, who does a couple of blogs every day.
Very prolific writer.
Yeah, it's just not human. It's not human. So
I would argue Doug's got a little harder because I'm just reading everything that comes into my feeds, and he's creating the original content. But yes, Doug is a very good author. I see a lot of him, and I do a lot of highlighting.
But you must do a lot of reading. But before we dig into that,
let's go earlier.
Let's go into the Wayback Machine. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the law and or technology, and which came first.
Sure. So originally, I wanted to be an architect. My father was an engineer with Bell of Pennsylvania at the time. Did a lot of architectural style work, a lot of plans for cable lay and all that kind of good stuff. And his younger brother, my Uncle Barry, was also an architect. And so as it getting closer to college and so on, I'm saying, guys, I think I really want to be an architect. So my father brings my uncle in and says, you don't want to be an architect. Definitely do not want to be in this business. So basically, my uncle and my father talked me out of that.
Which, by the way, it's funny because my dad and my uncle were both lawyers. And when I was thinking about law, they both sat me down and said, you may not go to law school. So, yeah. It seems
so, my other love was computers. We got computers in high school. The original Apple IIs, I was saying a little bit before we went live, they converted a storage closet, brought in 2 Apple IIs, cassette tape recorders and so on. I guess I will admit this, the statute of limitations is probably over. The group of 3 of us stole the key to the computer room from my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Kumler. And so we would let ourselves into the computer room whenever we wanted. And that really became a love of computers. So I ended up going to University of Pittsburgh for computer science, so computer science / math. I got more credit short or so of a math minor as well. But so that's how I got into it. And then in terms of the law.
And let me interrupt if I could, Jeff. So
Sure.
when you got to Pitt, what were the computers? What were you learning on?
Oh, so we had most of our programming was DEC clusters, PDP-10s. We had some VAX
I was going to
clusters.
say you had to have VAX back then.
Yeah.
So
We, I think my first semester, maybe 2, we did a lot of cards, and then the cards went away in favor of paper CRTs. I was on the Senate Computer Usage Committee, which brought in, man, really early clones of the IBM. So we had AT&T and some others that would probably be in the 85–90% compatible range back when the, whose BIOS was your computer using was a real key question, and determined, the level of compatibility you might have. And I got to have a limited involvement with DuPont, which University of Pittsburgh had I guess you'd call it a timeshare arrangement with the Cray supercomputers. So our senior faculty in certain areas could timeshare through the Senate Computer Usage Committee, make requests and so on to get some time on the supercomputers.
that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
It was a very, very different time. I mean, so again, to continue that story, so my uncle, who again had talked me out of being an architect, I wanted to get a computer. And so my uncle said, don't worry, just don't ask where it comes from. Got me an Apple IIe. And I think, quite frankly, it came with a school's name on it. So I think he got it through an educational discount, which I was a student. So, education was, if you expand the term of education, that was that. But again, my father worked for Bell, Pennsylvania. I asked him to show me how to tear apart a telephone so that I could install a modular jack for my first Hayes 300 baud modem. So when other students had to go off to the remote job entry sites and so on, I was sitting pretty in my dorm room and didn't have to do much of anything. I could do everything from there. So I was an RA during those years, had back in the day different wording, I guess, different meanings to the words today. We had what was called an alternative lifestyle floors, and it was basically I was in charge of the engineering floor. So my floor had the highest per capita computer student ratio, and we bunch of nerds, just a whole bunch of nerds on one floor.
Yeah, that's got a whole different meaning today.
Yeah. So, and from what I understand, an early gamer, right?
Yeah. So I was telling the story. My first attempt, major programming for the Apple II was basically an asteroids clone. But I never got it quite right. So you could pass through the asteroid sometimes and not blow up. And otherwise you could come within a finger length of the asteroid, not hit it, but yet still blow up. What is it, 50 years later, I still haven't fixed the bugs in that particular program.
I think you got to find some more time to and fix it, because we all want to play asteroids. Okay, so that's your love of computers started early. So
started early, continued through college. I graduated with a degree in computer science and mathematics. Was looking for a job. Took the first summer off. Really ended up taking my parents' motorhome all the way up to Sabbath Day Lake, Maine, from South Central Pennsylvania. But was looking for a job, and this little company called Rust Consulting was looking for somebody. So I said, oh, okay, that'll be interesting. I I could see that. It was in Northern Virginia in the Herndon area. So I applied, and as I was saying to Tom earlier, Kurt Meltzer has come in and out of my life a lot. So the first time I met Kurt was when he hired me at Rust Consulting.
But they wanted somebody with computer skills.
Yes. So my job was, again, Rust Consulting was a litigation support company, predates eDiscovery. Ron Rust is an amazing individual. Learned everything I know about the industry from him. And I managed the Wang VS 100. I managed CCI Power 532, I think it was. I wrote the original Bates labeling program. So you could put prefix and postfix in. We sold, I don't know how many million labels for discovery purposes. I did all kinds of different databases. In fact, I gave a speech Friday, before the Defense Trial Council. And one of the things I was talking about, my subject was AI, but we were talking about expert witnesses. And one of the first cases that I was involved in that just utterly and totally consumed and fascinated me was the DuPont Plaza hotel fire in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Yep.
So my job, take all the computers, set them up, get everybody comfortable with the tools and what they need to research for whatever on the case. But you got to see little pieces of all those experts. And again, I was just fascinated. The physics of the construction of the building, the way the air flowed, the materials combustibility, and how that fire would have gone up the walls and this way and that way, and where it would have been blocked and where it wouldn't. Anyway, so I was bringing that up because I think defensible AI, transparent AI is going to be something that's going to be very key for us. The black box AI we have now does not work very well, I don't think, in a court situation. You can't tell the judge, you can't tell the jury, well, my AI said so. That just doesn't work. But anyway, so that just continued my fascination. I mean, we were working with, we did the largest case at the time that was ever done on a PC, General Westmoreland libel case. We were working with Priam data towers. Oh my God, that's going back in time. The 3-foot tall, 292 meg disk drive. You had to have special software to break the DOS 33 meg barrier. But we were cutting edge for sure in the use of personal computer technology.
That's cool.
Litigation support.
That's awesome. So that was your intro into litigation or discovery.
And lawyers. So I got involved in a bunch of oil rig issues in Oklahoma and Texas. That was my first exposure to lawyers, was Texas and Oklahoma litigators. I learned a whole new vocabulary. As a kid coming out of college from Pennsylvania, I learned a whole new vocabulary.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how long were you at Rust?
Oh my, I was at Rust for, that would have been 85 to maybe early 90s, I think, when I went to Hildebrandt, I think was next.
Okay.
Yeah. So cool. Kurt had left Rust Consulting and went on to Hildebrandt. He said, hey, you ought to come join me over here at Hildebrandt. And so I did. Was, again, one of the best moves I've ever had. So Hildebrandt, whether you loved or hated Brad Hildebrandt, had experts in every single area of law. And I got to work with premier folks in finance, in space planning, in library management, because technology was more of an add-on at that point in time. It wasn't kind of the driver of some of those things. And, those were the days where you were doing $100,000 technology audits and assessments, and that rode that wave until pretty much the rise of the internal CIO. And you could see kind of the writing on the wall that that wasn't going to be long for external consultants anymore. And I had been giving, one of the things I said to Tom earlier, at Hildebrandt, one of the things you did was you wrote articles for marketing purposes, or you taught CLEs, gave speeches and presentations and so on. And so I did a lot of CLEs. Oh my God, I wouldn't be surprised if I gave over 1,000 CLEs in the time that I was there.
Wow.
And one of the things that I would always do, I would do Columbus like every year, and 2 or 3 gentlemen from the technology committee at Porter Wright, Morris, and Arthur would always be in the crowd. And so they would listen attentively, and then when it was over, they'd basically come ask me for free advice on what they should be doing with the technology. And at one point, again, I forget exactly how far it was into it, the head of the technology committee, Mason Evans, came to me and said, well, we think we're ready to implement, we're ready to move forward now. I said, can you design us a plan? I said, sure, I can design you a plan. Who's going to implement it? Well, we have the technology committee, and they can, no. Technology committees do not implement. Yeah. I said, you need somebody who's going to take this and run. So I became the first CIO at, actually, my title was Director of Information Systems, and it spanned 2 lines. It was so long on the business card. But I eventually did become the CIO. I kept opening my mouth in management meetings. Phones were a facilities function at that point in time. And facilities guys saying, we're going to get a key system over here, we're going to get a phone system here. And I raised my hand and said, well, you're not going to have compatibility with those systems. Anybody that travels from office to office is going to have to learn 2 different kinds of phone systems. Your voicemail is not going to be compatible. So I think it was about a week later, the telephones became an IT function after that. I was the first, I believe, at Porter Wright, the first CIO to have the law library report to me. That was new and different. I ended up speaking at AALL. Oh goodness, I don't remember when that was. That was probably 83, 84. And it was actually a hostile crowd because nobody wanted technology taking over the library. It was bad enough that you had these massive CD-ROM towers that contained all of the Lexus or West CDs and so on. But law library reporting to technology, that was just not something that was supposed to happen. And so it was a semi-hostile crowd. And with all due respect to librarians, the best ones are always a little bit left of center, or left or right. They're just not a little. They walk their own tune, so to speak.
Yes.
And so there were 5,000 or 6,000 of them. I think that was the number. And at the end of it, I had, well, you need to talk to my IT director because I understand what you're saying and I agree with what you're saying. You just need to talk to him and tell him that that's the way the library needs to be integrated, right? So I guess from there, I had my shortest career ever in the vendor side. We had just completed all the major upgrades at Porter Wright, and I was told, we're going to pull back a little bit from technology, invest some more money in marketing. And I was young, and young people sometimes are a little impetuous and so on. And I said, I don't really want to sit around and watch everything I just built rust. So I'll go somewhere else. So I say it's the shortest one ever. I think the good Lord wanted me to meet and marry my wife because she was an SRA employee. And so I spent about 9 months, I think, at SRA before that, just kind of, and I went on to McKenna and a couple other law firms. So that's kind of how I entrenched. And to be honest, going back to Porter Wright for a second, we think of firms today. We've got Dettons de Chong with 9 or 10,000 lawyers. I can actually claim to have worked for an AmLaw 100 law firm because Porter Wright had 250 lawyers back in the early 90s. Was I think the 83rd or 89th largest law firm in the United States. So times have changed just a little bit.
Just slightly.
Just a bit.
In a lot of areas. So obviously you've gone on to have a great career in the law firm space in a couple of different firms over time, and we don't have to dig into each firm. But what are the major shifts that you saw over your time as CIO in different firms? Like, and I'm not talking about specific, obviously AI, the rise of e-discovery, things like that, the rise of computers on everyone's desk, those things. But from a thought process perspective, like what have you noticed to be like the actual major trends through your time?
So when I was consulting with Hildebrandt, we would actually have associates come to us after hours on our big technology audits and so on, and say, you got to tell the partners it's okay for us to use computers, that we can touch a keyboard, that is not a secretarial function. So that was even happening back at that point in the late 80s. But I think probably the biggest things is that it's not an add-on. It's an integrated piece. When you look at going from back office to front office and all the pieces in between, I mean, you go from the early days where, you know, you could be inconvenienced if your computer room shut down, to now you cannot operate
Right, you're
without
done.
things working. Yeah, you're toast if that happens. So I think the integration of that, the first shift was, again, when I was at Hildebrandt, the goal from bringing outside resources in to do work to, okay, this is sufficient. We have to be able to maintain our own environment. So whether it's IT, whether it's e-discovery, and I guess e-discovery is still kind of a fence rider. You know, there's 50% of the world thinks that your e-discovery function should be inside, and others, the other 50% is they should be outside the firm. Both have advantages and disadvantages. But I think that's probably the biggest, was that it's an integrated piece, that it's an ongoing expense that the firm has to maintain. Next, not sure if it was necessarily the next one, but law firms evolving their security models. It was the FBI and MI5 or 6, whichever one is the domestic English version, talked about law firms being the soft underbelly. And, you know, that was not an improper view of law firms.
Right.
A lot of firms had very Mickey Mouse security operations, and, you know, having I mean, I can remember in my early law firms, you know, if you had a initiative that was an inconvenience to the partnership, the likelihood that that got passed was few and far between. I still remember, wasn't my first firm, since I mentioned it by name, it wasn't Porter Wright, but
Right.
one of my firms, we'll give you the time frame. We just implemented BlackBerries, my predecessor, and he did not put passwords on anything. So I come in as the new CIO and I say, okay, guys, we're going to have passwords on all our BlackBerries. And I still remember to this day taking a call from one of the partners. My phone started here and it got to about here, and
Right.
it's still hurting my ear. And the most interesting phrase that partner shouted was, "Do you know how hard this makes using my BlackBerry when I'm trying to drive?"
Well, obviously.
Okay,
Right.
so my next call when I hung up with him and my ears stopped ringing was to HR saying, "We don't have a policy about use of technology while operating vehicles."
Well,
So
yeah,
we did after that. We did after that.
yeah.
But I think
So
those are some of the biggies. I mean, the other one I think is, again, in the vein of CIOs coming in-house, is all those different positions, project management, and all those things. I mean, we could spend a week talking about legal project management, which I think is a real
yes, it's the natural
BS
stuff.
term. I think that there's project management, but not legal project management. It's just project management in the legal space.
Well, it's project management with the proper knowledge. That's the key, which really is, you're right. It is, any project manager has to know their space. But I would say that there are some, for good or for bad, there are some very legal specific requirements that kind of pull you away.
I won't doubt that, but I would argue that you don't have the big three. You don't have accounting project management. You don't have, in the construction industry, bridge building project management. I think in legal, we have a tendency to want to prefix everything. I wrote an article, you guys remember the Adam West Batman?
Sure.
From the 60s. So
Sure.
if you remember the bat cape, everything was labeled: bat shark repellent, the bat reactor, the bat chute. I have a tendency to think that in legal, and again,
We have to.
if you're using it to sell it internally, okay, I'm not going to call it, because there's a lot of very positive things about having project management, but I will argue, and again, won't take up the rest of this, but I really do think that there is only project management. You absolutely have vertical experts in the area, and quite frankly, sometimes not having an expertise with a project manager can be to your advantage, and trying to get everybody to explain the individual pieces and parts. But I really do view legal's tacking on of legal to all the different things that we use.
So
Really
here's where I'd argue a little bit, because I think that the legal project management is actually its own thing, because there are certain pieces that move away from traditional project management concepts. Meaning you do need to have the core concepts, but there are certain things that when it comes to planning and it comes to approach, you need to take a little bit of a different approach.
You think those are different than the kinds of matters that Deloitte or the big accounting firms handle? I mean, I agree with you. There's the whole issue of the partnership model, and having to explain to people outside of legal, I work for 250 bosses, each of whom thinks he or she owns 51% of the business. So you have aspects of that. But I would argue that the legal matters we take on versus the matters that you take on
matter, right?
And they don't call it accounting project management. So that would be my retort.
Jeff, how much do you think of that is rampant in the United States because of our insistence on not letting lawyers and non-lawyers swim in the same pool? Does the same thing exist in Great Britain or Australia or Japan, where
I'm more familiar with the British market and the Australian markets.
Okay.
But I would argue that for the longest time, the United States had a technology first outlook. So as a consultant, as a CIO, if you have something you encounter, the first thing lawyers ask me is, what do we need to buy to fix this problem? It's in particular in KM, it's probably most prevalent. But in the United Kingdom, you have know-how coordinators, you have senior attorneys that aren't necessarily practicing so much. US tried that with what they call PSAs, and it didn't work out all that well. You now have these larger KM groups that contain lawyers and so on. But I think it is a more of a US centric piece. I spoke in Australia, I don't remember when that was, but was shocked that my security presentation went over like a lead balloon, because nobody in Australia cared about cybersecurity at that point in time. It was really odd, really different.
Right. And that's like the last 5 years, or?
Oh no, I've been here for 7 years. I'd have to look it up. I honestly don't remember. TJ was still at ILTA at the time. She called me last minute on Monday saying, "Could you be on a plane to Australia on Wednesday?" I said, "Well, let me check my passport. Maybe I can."
Right. Okay, so before we get into PinHawk, I want a topic that's going to lead into it, and that is, in your role as CIO, what have you seen from what works and what doesn't work in regards to educating lawyers on technology, in terms of actually getting them to understand, to use technology properly, as opposed to just, we're going to buy something and it'll solve the problem.
We know how to avoid shelfware.
Yeah. So what have you seen in that space?
I think the biggest thing is understand that different lawyers look for different things. If I'm an associate and I'm doing the grunt work, if I am a senior partner and I don't care about anything other than the final pieces and results, you potentially have to sell whatever system you're looking at from those multiple perspectives. What's in it for me is a very key piece. um, if I have to create the stuff, then how's that important to me? If I have to review the information for the final pieces and the final editing and so on, then how do I look at the system from that perspective? So you have these multiple views, these multiple facets of how a system gets used. Department chair is going to be different than somebody who's not a chair. Somebody with responsibility for an office is going to look at things slightly differently. So I've always found that my technology. I know CIOs who love or hate their technology committee. And if your technology committee is trying to run the department, I understand why you hate them. It's not, technology group is never meant to be an operational group. It's supposed to be kind of a forward thinking feedback kind of group. So one of the things that I always try and do is get on board my technology committee first, because no matter what I say, my degree is computer science mathematics. It is not a JD. And now after, almost 40 years in the business, I could play a lawyer on TV probably, but I still can't necessarily get into the nitty gritty. I can tell you more about litigation and insurance, reinsurance, and subrogation work than I probably care to. But there are still some areas where I don't know how you get from point A to point B. And so if I can get somebody with a little more savvy, basically get your leaders and so on to say, okay, well, I'm understanding this. That way, the attorney to attorney questions can be answered by somebody who's going to be respected for the answers given. Again, I can say whatever I want. I've never practiced law. So I think that's a key piece. And the other one is just, again, building up over time that rapport with your different attorneys. I sit in on every single practice meeting that I'm allowed to, and sometimes I invite myself to ones that I'm not supposed to go to until they say, okay, well, you can come. And my goal is to be a total mouse in the background, sit and listen to everything that's going on and hear what are the pain points. What are the pain points for the attorneys? What are the pain points for the clients that we have coming in? Again, my very first firm, I was walking behind two attorneys. This is where I learned the value of that listening. I was walking behind two attorneys. We're talking about one of our clients. It was a First Amendment review issue, and the client wasn't happy with us because we couldn't do it fast enough. And so they turned down one hall, I turned down the other, and I'm sitting at my desk thinking about that conversation. And I pick up the phone, call one of the attorneys, say, can we talk about that? I overheard you guys, and can we talk about it? And we ended up proposing basically direct access into their systems, had probably one of the first serious security audits in order to be able to do that, and walked away. The client was happier than could be. We could now access stuff, basically what I would call like the internal teleprompter type systems. And they were happy as could be because we were faster in the loop. And in the news business, if you're not first, you've lost, right? That's the general rule of thumb. So I've always found that listening, my grandmother had one of those signs about, 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. Now, I've not necessarily always adhered to that, but like I said, I do sit in on every single practice meeting. Every firm I've ever been part of, I have tried to just sit in the background. If it's a physical meeting, Zoom meetings, it's pretty easy to hide in when you get a whole bunch of people on a call. But well, why do you want to be it? I don't want to say anything. I don't want to, unless somebody asks me a question. In which case, if you're running the meeting, you want to have a tech Q&A piece, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I just want to hear what you're saying about your clients, what the needs are. And you run into all kinds of things where the three-legged stool is people, process, and technology. And I really do believe that it is that order for a reason. So many people want to jump right to the technology, but when you listen, you say, oh, well, this is a people issue. So-and-so doesn't know how this works. The workflow, the process between the people is broken. We don't need new tech. In fact, we don't even need tech in this process. Right. All we need is a workflow that works better. So you begin to work through all those different pieces. And I would argue my job for the last, I've been here for 7, almost 8 years, last decade and a half has been more about the people, the process, than the technology. I gave a set of, when I was doing my own consulting after I left McKenna Long, I was in a Canadian, doing some Canadian law firm consulting, and I was speaking at one of the, sugar, they don't call them bars up there, they call them,
Taverns.
anyway, yeah. And I was saying at the time, technology is not the issue. You take whatever you consider to be the most advanced document management system and Microsoft Word. I'll take WordPerfect and what you consider to be a second or third tier DMS. Let me work on the people and process. I will have a more efficient law firm than you will. It is not necessarily about the technology. And there's a lot of great technologies out there. We're a NetDocs shop. I like NetDocs a little more than I like iManage, but there's a lot of great things about iManage. Are you going to drive your firm into the ground by making a choice of one of those two products? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But if you don't use it correctly, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so it's the people and the process. That is, I said, is the key piece. And so the more you listen to how things work, I mean, again, you look at and you say, okay, well, you assume something's working this way because you're not an expert in that area. So you would assume, if I imagine a workflow, this is the workflow I'd imagine. And then you discover that there's no workflow, or it's the first thing that you get is 300 pages of a document. We do some of this where you get these land analysis pieces, and they're 1,500 pages, and you can. What do you do? You make a copy of that document. You don't scan it. You don't do your searches internal to the document itself. So there's a lot of ways, again, that the people and the process piece far beat the technology component.
Right. So absolutely, people, process, technology. Let's get into PinHawk, because I think that kind of does tie a lot of those pieces together. So for those who aren't familiar, what's your elevator pitch of PinHawk?
So PinHawk is a daily digest. I see and read through, I think it's somewhere close to 1,000 feeds, both legal and non-legal feeds every day. They're prearranged in categories. So we've got KMI, we've got finance, we've got marketing. My job is to go through all of that and work on the signal to noise ratio, trying to get rid of the stuff that's not important. And then usually it's about 3 highlights a day. Sometimes there's nothing and I do 1 or 2. Sometimes there's just so much that I do 6 or 7. But ultimately it is your curated feed for what's happening in the legal technology world. I think we're about 20,000 or so subscribers at this point. It's a joy. So again, circling back where Kurt is some kind of cosmic link to me. Kurt was the original editor of the digest, the technology digest, and I believe he got a job at Oric as CIO, and so he said, I'm not going to be able to do this. And he said to me, you do this now. You use Google Feeds and all these other things to read and try and get a handle on what's happening, try and look at, synthesize what's a trend and what's a key piece or what things can be ignored. So why don't you do the newsletter? So that was, 2011, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. And I loved it. I mean, it was true. I was doing all this anyway. The technology that PinHawk uses that brings me my feeds and highlights those things was exceptional to what I was using at the time. And so it really was. It is still a great joy to do that. I synthesize, go through those things, look for trends. When I was hired here at Jackson Kelly, I said, I do this newsletter. You've seen some of it. I said I would like to continue after becoming CIO. I said I'll do my best to make sure it doesn't interfere with the day job. So my day starts about 5 o'clock. I prep the newsletter. I pull the trigger on the new feeds about 5:30. And then really from there, it depends on how much news there is. Mondays are already, always super heavy because you have the weekend and so on. Sometimes, people go on vacation, over the holidays and so on. You get very, very thin newsletters with not a whole lot to go on. But one of the biggest questions I probably ask regularly is, how do I choose what I highlight? Well, I choose what I highlight based on what I find interesting, what I would pass on to my peers inside the firm, what I would highlight and send to all of our attorneys, because I think it's a key piece. I just sent, there's another gentleman that joined the Schwartz Club on ChatGPT in Colorado Springs, I think it was. And so I sent 2 articles to my boss, our general counsel, and a couple others in the firm. And before I could do it, it went out to all attorneys as a warning on how not to use ChatGPT in this code.
So hold on. So you spend a half hour in the morning curating the feeds, basically.
No, much more than that. So from 5 to 5:30, I'm just prepping the newsletter form itself. So what is the HTML that the newsletter will come out in? Then from 5:30 to 7:38 is usually when I wrap up.
I was going to say, because I mean, anyone who's seen the newsletter knows that you actually do read, at least you seem to read a good number of the articles. You're not just forwarding headlines, and you're providing actual feedback and commentary on some of them. Pretty amusing commentary at times, and so obviously, I mean that's got to take up at least a couple hours. So
I have a multi-pass process. So like I said, I'll get anywhere from 300 to 600 articles that are new in a given day. So I'll scan the headlines on all of those, and I will mark the ones that I want to review later. And then I will go in and I'll start
and sorry, are you just using like a standard RSS reader, or
it's custom PinHawk technology? I mean, it's Joe Bookman, who was the original owner of PinHawk, had some really marvelous technology put in place. And like I said, it was far superior to any of the RSS feed stuff that I was doing. So like I said, it comes in all organized. So every time I add a source, I give it a category. Is it under AIKM? Is it under marketing? Is it under
practice management? Whatever it is.
Management, all that kind of stuff. So it all comes kind of preset. Now, it's never perfect. Ars Technica is a good non-legal feed for technology, but they talk about rocket ships and everything else in the world, and so part of my noise to signal improvements, I try and go through and get rid of all that. Gaming is a very hot topic. Not really for the newsletter. So Ars Technica does movie reviews. So I occasionally read the movie review for a movie I'm interested in and then delete it so it doesn't show up in everybody else's newsletter. But ultimately then I get to usually about 20, 25 that are kind of the finalists. And then I read them. And there's some that are so short, it's like, okay, well, squirrel, and I don't want that one. Others that are very, very long, I will go through them. Again, if it's something that catches my interest and takes me through to the very end, then I usually put a disclaimer on that, this one's going to take you a little while. Occasionally I've done word counts because I'm curious how long it is. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned humor. I think humor is a great way to remember things. So I try and make it light. I try and make it interesting. I will go off the script and sometimes just highlight something that's just weird or interesting technology, has nothing to do with legal. Something that's, so occasionally we'll do a Friday funny because I think that we all sometimes work a little too hard, and a little humor and lightness makes the day and the weeks.
I personally find that your personal aspect of it, the fact that it's not just could be written by an AI, the fact that hey, I'm taking my daughter to college today, like, that kind of stuff. And you're not going to get your normal, it's that it makes it feel human. So again, back to the people side of things, connecting to the people. It definitely aids in wanting to see what is going to show up on a daily basis. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. I do try and make it personal in that respect. I've done a lot to change the newsletter over the years. So we do a weekly summary. If getting a daily email is too much, then you can have kind of the peer-powered weekend version where through some technology magic in the background, it will rank because PinHawk is a aggregate newsletter, so we know who clicks on what, and so you can see it on that Saturday edition. What are the top reads? I always look at that for feedback. And it's like, oh, wow, that's an article I
didn't
never
know
would have
that.
guessed would
Right.
have attracted
Right.
people's attention.
What
Other
was
ones that
what was the most surprising article like that over the last, let's say, year?
there was, it was probably 6 months ago or so. And it was it was a train wreck article about lawyers doing things that lawyers shouldn't do. And I put it in there because I was just, quite frankly, flabbergasted that this kind of thing, this kind of culture, and could lead to this particular thing. So I did just a little ditty on it, and it was a number one or number two read for that week. And it's like, well, okay, so now I know. And other things that I thought were spectacular pieces. Okay, not everybody thought it was as spectacular as I thought. So try and take that feedback. And I know that there's a lot of KM readers. I know there's a lot of, I get frustrated myself at times because for the last week or so, I felt like I've been doing nothing but an AI newsletter. And so I consciously start looking for things that are not AI related.
Yeah.
But then, you get things that you just can't not comment on because they're so timely. This guy in Colorado Springs did the exact same thing, apparently discovered the day of his appearance in the court that what he had filed was bogus ChatGPT made up cases. And quite frankly, Schwartz didn't really, I knew it would happen at some point.
But
really my biases. The Schwartz is like a 30-year veteran, I believe, practicing for 30 plus years. So smaller firm, didn't have access to Lexis and Westlaw. So I get that to a certain point. But I believe the Colorado attorney has been practicing, or Colorado Springs attorney has been practicing for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So that to me kind of fit the model. That's who I would have expected to be the first attorney to make a mistake like that. Sadly, it won't be the last. But and that was my whole presentation for the Defense Trial Council. Put up on the screen. I'm paraphrasing slightly here. If you're not willing to invest the time and energy in finding out how advanced AI works, how it fails, how you need to follow up on it, then don't use it. Ban it at your firm. So that was like my second slide. And then I put, thank you very much. Any questions?
Right.
And then I went on to give the actual presentation. But it is. It is a game. It has all the potential to be a game changer. I don't think it's truly changed the game yet because you're talking about, a calculator that every so often randomly tells you that 1 + 1 is 3. So
right.
You have to have that, all the I's double dotted, all the T's double crossed to make sure that you know what you're using, how you're using it, where it can go wrong. It's just, those are very critical things. And so it means seemingly so many people want to jump, again, bypass the people in the process, jump right to the technology and try and save time or do whatever. So it's like I said, it's frustrating because every vendor wants to include AI in their product, right? So even if you're using some kind of natural language parser like everybody uses with Google search, we want to now highlight that our product includes AI. all the firms want to be able to say to their clients that, we use AI to your benefit. Now, with these cases coming up and the judges getting pissed off, I think there's 3 of them now. Texas, Illinois, and the U.S.
International Court,
Trade.
yeah.
Where not only do you have to certify that, which again, you get into these arguments of where is the failure? Is the failure with the technology, with the lawyering, or to a certain point with common sense? And a couple of judges have said, you will certify that you have read every aspect of this. If there's any AI involved in this, you have read, you've researched, you've done everything. And
I see it as a guiding tool. It really is a guiding tool. It's a tool that helps point you in the right direction. And whether that be helping you to write something or research something or whatever it is, but it gives you that head start that then you need to actually do the work. So, yeah.
And like I said, it's so interesting to see how people want to take shortcuts with it, and you can't. But the other thing that I think is interesting is that I would argue that the bulk of what I see in my PinHawk news feeds so want AI to be the next sliced bread, the next major revolution and disruption, that everybody's saying, well, it's a lawyer problem. And I'm not disagreeing with that. Not disagreeing with that in any way, shape, or form. But if you had Excel that randomly told you that 1 + 1 was 3, how many accountants would be seriously using that tool? How many people would be up in arms over the tool? So, ChatGPT has a percentage. I'm not going to give what the percentages are because I don't know, but has a percentage of skin in the game for there being a problem. And until you get through the confabulations and delusions and hallucinations, you're always going to have that. And so again, if you look at what I would generalize as the bar rules, do your due diligence, right? As long as you're doing your due diligence, doesn't matter what happens from here to here. Get my hands on the screen here.
Yep.
As long as at the end of it, the attorney is the one that has blessed it all. And that's where all the errors so far seem to have come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are rapidly running out of time. So Tom, unless you have any other questions right now, we will hop over to the fun part of this conversation.
It's all been fun for me. So
yeah, no, it's been great. Right. Okay, so let's go through a couple quick getting to know you questions. So let's start with, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oh, wow. I have loved our move to West Virginia. The mountains, everything here is absolutely gorgeous. I have a good friend who works for Google who has a house on Maui. The sunsets and the ability to go to the beach and so on. There you go, Maui, yes.
Yep.
I think I would like that, but I'm not sure I could get into the isolation of the island and the fact that you just can't drive and go someplace. So at this point, I'd have to say my favorite places I have lived have been Northern Virginia and West Virginia. So a mixture of the two, or really just where we are right now.
Cool. Awesome. If you could have an unlimited supply of one thing, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. Money.
Okay.
If you can get unlimited supplies of everything else.
Yes,
yeah, that's a valid point. I like what you're thinking. Okay.
So that comes from a father of 5 who has 2 through college and 3 going into college. Well, the third one, the middle child, has 2 more years, and my twins start college this year. So I have 3 in college at one time.
So an unlimited amount of money may not even cover it.
Yeah, exactly. You might need more than that unlimited.
It's funny because Monday I got 2 new computers. So Abby is going to SCAD, going to do sequential art. I got her a Surface Pro 9. We'll wrap technology back into this here.
Yep.
And not an inexpensive machine with 32 gigs of memory. My other daughter, Emma, is going to Shawnee for game design. And so she has to be able to run the Unreal game engine version 5 or whatever. So she has an i9, an HP Omen, I think it is, I decided on. So two very powerful machines. So yes, that is also in my mind because I wrote a check. I used my credit card and a substantial amount of money went out of that credit card for those two purchases.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of kids, who is your favorite Disney hero or heroine? And there's a follow-up question to this.
I like Stitch as kind of the anti-hero. He caused problems.
And getting back to Hawaii, so
getting back to Hawaii, I didn't think about that connection, but that was certainly worth. I'll stick with Stitch.
Okay, would you switch places with Stitch?
Yeah, I would switch places.
Okay.
I'm not sure the partnership here would like his technology choices.
Yeah.
But
Letting him run rampant through the firm. Last question: Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm not that big of a geek. Or The Expanse we've added in as another option because it's popular one.
Absolutely, Star Trek.
Star Trek.
There we go.
All versions of it. The original, I loved that. They had some really great episodes, some really bad, corny ones. Next Generation took me a little while to get used to that, but
that was the new
Picard series. Strange New Worlds, I love. I love Anson. Is it Anson Williams? I think that plays Pike, Christopher Pike. He also played the King of the Inhumans in the Marvel TV series. The one I love his. Right. I love his take on it.
Horrible show, by the way.
Which
Inhumans,
one? Yes. If you notice the first show, which was supposed to be. They actually broke it into two parts. The CGI on the first version is actually better because it had a larger budget than all of the other remaining episodes.
Yeah.
So yes, it was pretty sad as both a technical as well as a writing.
Yes.
Was not that good. I totally agree with you on that.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
But I would also throw in Battlestar Galactica and Firefly.
Well, Firefly is absolutely one of the greatest shows ever created. So I will agree with that. Cut short way too early, but
yes,
we'll be sad about that. So cool. But have you watched The Expanse?
I've seen pieces of it. I have not gotten into it yet. Right now I am rewatching. My son started. Watching the live action Death Note. And so I got reinterested in that. So I'm now kind of going through Death Note again.
You know what I just binged on a couple of weeks ago? Did you ever see Fringe?
Yep. Yes. I have not watched that in some time. I did come across it. I put it on my list to
Walter,
go back.
the professor.
John Noble, right? John Noble? Isn't John Noble the guy, the older gentleman?
J.J. Abrams.
No, the director, but the
older scientist.
Yeah.
Walter the scientist is the one I cared about. He was hilarious.
I think the actor's name is John Noble, and he
was
brilliant.
He was tremendous. Anyway,
good stuff.
Okay, Tom, your turn.
One quick question: Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
Another one for me.
Actually, tying Beatles back in, did you read that John McCartney resampled John Lennon using AI and put him back into a song?
Yes.
So watch forward in the election. This is not a political statement. You won't know what you can read. Trust what you can read, what you see, what you hear, or anything else, because there will be AI generations of stuff that are totally unreal.
That's a great story because, they had done it old school after Lennon died. Yoko gave them 4 songs on cassette tapes. One of them was a pretty good song all those years ago. they were able to redo it using old technology. Two of them apparently were in very bad shape, and Harrison would not agree to work on it. He said there's nothing there. McCartney took the third one and I think did it on his own album. But the fourth one is the one that McCartney is now he's used AI on.
Use AI to bring it back.
Yeah, to redo everything with the approval apparently of Yoko and Harrison's widow. And I thought, you know, a guy like Harrison, who was such a technology guy, would have gone crazy for this technology. It would have been.
I think it's insane that you can now go out to an AI site and say, create me a song about purple frogs in the style of Britney Spears, and you will get, you know, words, lyrics, tune, and then
The voice.
What you can't really distinguish as her voice.
Yes.
Doing the song.
It's good.
It's a wonderful world we live in.
Trademark lawyers everywhere must be going, oh boy, here we go. Okay, last question.
I mean, it was amazing just on that when I saw McCartney last year.
Yeah, the duo that he did.
The duo.
Yeah, I got a feeling.
But how they've now taken it, like it's now the next, you know, it's leapfrog that. So it's incredible.
You want to hear something amazing? It's similar. I don't know. You may have seen this. McCartney apparently years ago did a duet, came up on stage with Brian Wilson, and I forget which song it was. It might have been In My Room, but somebody AI'd it to make it a Beatles song, a Beatles version of this Beach Boys song. Yeah, with Brian singing fifth, right? And well, fourth, because Ringo didn't really sing. But I mean, yeah, the stuff that people can do with this is astonishing.
Amazing.
So last question, Jeff, we gave you a heads up on this ahead of time. If you could spend a day with anybody in our business, living or dead, who would that person be and what would you do?
I would love to meet Steve Wozniak. I envy a couple of friends. He spoke, I think, at a British legal technology event. And so some good friends of mine are showing pictures of him, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm not in England at the wrong time of year for that. But I've always been fascinated with his approach to things. So of course, he is the hardware mastermind behind the Apple and the Apple II and all those pieces. I would just love to sit down and talk tech with him. How it changed society, how it good and bad, what he sees as the future. I mean, he's a quirky kind of guy. I think I read an interview once where he carries 3 different cell phones. One is an iPhone. I think the other 2 are Android.
Of course,
but he uses them for different versions. And like, okay, well, I get the Dilbert belt kind of reference to having all that stuff, but it's like I really, why? Just why? I'd ask him why, and then just sit back and soak it in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that would be funny. He would be that sort of character. It would be fun to spend some time with. Great. Well, thank you for your time, Jeff. It was great to talk to you. Great to catch up. You and I had only met personally, face to face, for the first time at ILTA back just before the last one before COVID. Of course, known you and of you and exchanged emails over the years, but that was the first time I ever ran into you in person. So thanks for taking the time. You're going to be at ILTA this year?
I was. My wife just put all the college events in my calendar. I'm not sure that it works anymore.
No, I hear you.
So we'll have to see. I was planning on it, but like I said, I've got 2 that are going back to school in August. The other one, SCAD, is still on a semester or different kind of schedule. So my daughter doesn't go there till September. So
I'm the same way, and I'm hoping that something like that will come up, like a wedding or something, because they're doing it at Disney, which is my absolute least favorite venue.
And not only that, but you now have all 4 hotels in the mix. So you don't have just this one in the Dolphin. You have the Yacht Club and whatever the 4th one is as well. So you're gonna have to go back and forth and back and forth.
I'm with you. That
golf carts will be a key thing.
Golf carts will be
remember the last time that built heavy duty was into golf carts. I believe one of them ended up in the bottom of the pool.
In the
So-
pool, right.
Eh,
Well,
you know,
and,
It is what it is.
of course, they've already sold sponsorships for the golf carts.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
of course,
Absolutely.
of course. No, I like the Gaylord in DC is still my favorite.
Yeah,
And-
It's a
and
good
I
place.
just
It's a good
like
place.
that. I like the whole thing. But anyways,
Okay.
well, we'll keep in touch. If you get there, hopefully we'll see each other. And Rocky,
Sounds like a
ditto.
plan.
All right. Thanks again for your
Yep.
time. Thanks for listening in, folks. We will see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.
Thank you, guys.